breakfast with a cousin from Minnesota, over in Waterloo. Then we took my wife around town here, showed her our tombstone and a few other things. She doesn't remember them, but she enjoys the moment. She knows about it.
Okay, well that's a positive then, isn't it?
The house we built in town.
How long did you live in Cedar Falls?
I was raised here, and after I graduated from college here in 2950, that's when I left.
Okay, all right. Today is March 26th, 2010. I am Jean Richardson, and I'm here with Richard Dick Hansen to talk about country schoolhouses. Thank you for joining us today, Dick.
Very happy.
What was your job title, and what were your main responsibilities?
In the county office?
Yes.
Okay, I first went to the Chickasaw County Superintendent's office in 1957, and I was Special Education Director. The next year, they added Fayette County with Chickasaw County, and I was Special Ed Director for the two counties until 1964. Then in 1964, I became the Joint County Superintendent for the two counties.
Was that common to have one person have two counties?
At that time, it was getting to be very popular.
But at that time, you were in charge of special ed?
Until 64.
Okay, okay. And how many years then were you in this position as county superintendent?
64 to 75, 11 years.
Where else did you work in Iowa in your teaching career?
I started out at Rhodes, Iowa, Marshall County, high school teacher and acting high school principal. Then I went up to, well, it's now Cal Community School. Alexander wasn't part of it at the time, and was high school principal there for 2 years. And then I was superintendent over at Bristow, Iowa for 3 years. And that's when I went into special education.
Well, let's talk then about Chickasaw County and Fayette County. Tell me about that part of the state, economically, socially.
Basically just rural. No large communities.
Would you say there was anything unique about that area?
Well, they're not unique to me because I spent most of my life in Northeast Iowa.
What makes the area special?
If you like outdoors, if you like to go fishing, all sports. And it's just a nice, wholesome, rural atmosphere.
Did you continue your own education while you were in this position?
Not so much after yes, I did. That's when I got my specialist degree here at UNI.
Who were some of the people that you worked with in your job?
Well, I had both boards and staff. I had in Fayette County 2 secretaries. Joe Smith was an old rural school teacher who carried over for many, many years in that office. And a lady named Leanna Holbert worked in the office. Special education, we had probably about a dozen staff members, audiologists, psychologists, speech clinicians, all types of services for handicapped children.
Did you work very closely with other county superintendents?
They were fairly close. They used to meet at least once a month. Well, Ronald Moore was a school psychologist, and later he was a director for a while. He still lives in West Union. Jerry Carspecken was an early speech clinician. He was.
What was that name again?
Carspecken. C-A-R-S-P-E-C-K-E-N.
And what was his first name?
Jerry.
Jerry.
He lived in West Union too, and he was later the supervisor for speech services with the AEA. Lou Bishop was the audiologist. I can go through a lot of names. Donovan was a psychologist. He helped me write most of the application for the Area 1 vocational school. So he did a lot of work on the side. We had a lady named King who had been a secretary for the CIA in Europe and came back and was a private secretary to Hertz Rent-A-Car in New York. Her husband was a West Point grad, but he got lost over the Atlantic Ocean in an airplane.
During World War II?
No, it was after that. She was a Lawler girl who became a speech clinician. Real nice gal. And there's just so many staff members over the years.
Let's talk about the rural schools. How often did you visit the rural schools?
When I was special ed director, I would go out to them maybe once or twice a year, but basically to do psychological testing of the kids or check their hearing or vision. Some of the same services we were given in the local schools. When I was county superintendent, we were down to one rural school.
Oh, that's all you had was just one rural school?
Fayette County was down to over 6 and had one rural school left. And about 1965, somewhere in there, they passed a law closing all non-high school districts. You like a little sidelight?
Yes.
Remember Wes Carlson?
Yes.
I told Wes that he was responsible for the records of the Dover 6 school district. So Wes in his noble way went out there to get the records. The lady wouldn't give them to him. She informed him that she was going to make a museum out of the school and she was keeping all records.
Who won?
She did.
So,
in fact, that is a museum today, I think.
So you were just really okay. You just had country schools for just that 1 year, and Fayette County had just the one. Did Chickasaw County have any?
They had them when I first came, but they reorganized with New Hampton while I was special ed director. I went out to a few of them at that time because the New Hampton school did a little different than most of them. When they reorganized, superintendent decided not to bring all these kids into the school. And for about the first year, we kept those schools operating just the way they were.
When you visited the rural schools, what were your responsibilities?
Well, special ed director is just basically to work with the children, see if there's any that needed any special help. The county superintendent would be the one responsible, my boss, for going out to the schools. But at that time, you were getting in the tail end of rural schools, and they didn't spend a lot of time at it. They were more involved in school district reorganization, building service programs.
Do you have any idea how the teachers felt about the visits from the county superintendents?
Well, I used to hear that they knew they were coming, they usually did. They got everyone pretty well primed and they were nervous as all get out. They didn't react that way to me because I wasn't threatening to them in any way.
You were there to work with the children. And
Yes.
Did you ever have any opportunities to meet with the local farm families?
Just if they were parents of a child that I wanted to talk to them about.
Then did the parents come to the school or did you go to the home?
I usually went to the home.
The year that you were county superintendent and you had Dover number 6, did you work with that school board at all?
I met with them just once. And that was just to get things settled up for closing. Actually, Fayette County had 2 rural districts yet. one had a school, but the other did not. And if you like anecdotes, I'll tell you this, the one that did not have a school, their kids all went to the Fayette school. And so we assigned them to the Fayette school. They turned around and filed a lawsuit against us for doing it. And I saw the president of the board and I asked him, how come? I said, we saved a year's taxes. Okay.
At the time, how much control did the rural school teachers have over her classroom? Did she or he, did they have most of the control, or was there a lot of control from the county superintendent's office?
I'd have to say the county superintendent would be in control, but he didn't really exercise it. She was usually free to go her own way, except the days that he came out to see her. No, they were pretty independent people.
What kinds of things would the county superintendent have had control of?
I'm not, you're getting into the legal part, the records part, that's all part of the background, but we had the County Institute Day, you probably remember that. That's a carryover from the rural school days for a while. And he used to call periodic meetings of the teachers, but by the time I was around in the office, there weren't enough teachers to call those meetings, so they were not exactly pushed too hard.
What role did the state superintendent of schools play?
None that I'm aware of, except they required reports and stuff. At that time, your State Department was not that strong, that involved. Everything kind of evolved from that. In other words, you started getting into the vocational school period and then the AA period. The State Department's role has changed an awful lot.
Do you have any idea what the reaction of the rural school teachers were to the closing of those schools?
I don't like to give you too many anecdotes.
Oh,
here.
I think the anecdotes are the best.
Most of them got very, very worried because most of them did not have too much training. There were some that had had a course in high school, right after I graduated from high school, what do they call it? Not normal.
Normal training.
Was it called normal?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I know Nashua, for example, had this, and the superintendent there would only hire a teacher if she had this particular normal training teacher, and then went back to school to get her BA.
He wanted them to have the normal training first.
That gal that taught that class was his ideal, and they had to have her, or he wouldn't hire him.
But he was not the norm.
What?
He was not the norm.
No.
Okay.
Why I'm smiling is I also did a little teaching one time,
Okay.
and these poor teachers have sat there on 2 years or less for the most part. Now suddenly they have to go into a town school, and there's teachers' supply, and they were losing their jobs right and left. It was either go to school or else. And so many of them would pull into school and take a lot of courses. Just so happened that I was teaching them in a workshop one summer, and practically every one of them I think had gotten straight A's.
Until they got you?
Yes. And I always remember as I was turning in my grades, president of the school, I knew him from other activities, Doc Garvey, Rob. I'm walking by and he called me in and we get to talking. He said, "You don't look too happy." And I said, "No. My grades are going to get to some repercussions. I don't want to put the college in a hot spot, but I just couldn't do what was expected there." He looked at me and says, "Oh, don't worry about it. Most of those old ladies will go out in the country and they may not help anyone, but they won't hurt anyone."
What about the children? What was their reaction?
I'm sorry.
I love it. What was the reaction of the children? Do you have any idea?
Kids were always excited when we went out. You mean when it was closing of the school? I don't think there was very much reaction that I ever saw. You know Northeast Iowa, I mean, they're not that big, and they knew many of the kids from church or other activities.
At the time we had the country schools, were there different requirements for town schools and country schools?
The town schools would usually require a little more, but it depended on the school itself.
Require more education?
You usually want a BA for a teacher, for example, where many of your teachers at that time in the row were basically two-year teachers. And I shouldn't say this, but many of them did not bother to go back to school until schools were closing.
Until they had to.
Yeah. Most of them were housewives around, but that was not a primary. You had to most important to be their family.
Okay.
The education started getting more professional, and when it did, it changed.
So when the rural schools closed, what would you say most of them did? Were most of them able to find jobs in town, or were they unemployed?
I used to hire a few of them in special education because we had a hard time finding special education teachers. And the rural school teachers, whatever their strengths and weaknesses, one, they worked with a lot of different types of children, and they were fairly flexible, and they made good special ed teachers for the most part. Also, we had a lot of where, say, a child was handicapped and couldn't go to school, and had good home instruction. They were great for getting materials and sitting down with the child and working. So special ed was a lot of it. I mean, I hired a lot of them then.
Did you see the subject area change much in your time in education? The content?
Not that I would have had that much contact with. I'm not sure I'd be able to give you a good answer on that.
About changes in teaching methods?
Yes, I'll throw out a name, you know, Catherine Klaus.
I know that name.
When she came around, your teachers became very, very professional because she was very professional and she knew what she was doing. And she worked with them very much and became much more professional activity than it was otherwise. So people like Catherine made a big influence.
Any technology that was used?
Not in comparison to what you're talking about now. We used to get a lot of teachers into our office for film strips, for example. Oh, those were a great device. We were shipping film strips in and out. We were also making overhead projectors when they came out. We would make different programs. We could print them out for them in different subjects. But that's a far cry from the electronics you're dealing with now.
What were the greatest need that the teachers had?
In the rural school,
Yes.
I would say the ones I knew probably would be just support. Kind of nice to have someone to talk to once in a while and interact with, and they really didn't have too much out there.
What would you say their biggest problems were?
The ones I knew, I'd have to say a lot of it was in their head because they wanted to be liked. There's something about the parents, and the parents were so close that sometimes you bend over backwards when you don't need to. Look, the politics of life out there. You're right sitting in the middle of all your parents, and it makes a different pressure.
Would you say there was a difference in quality between rural and town school education?
Yes, I'll say there was, but basically it comes back to the number of children and the splitting up into grades versus K-8. I mean, your rural school teacher was covering too much and could not do it the same way a fifth grade teacher could focus on that particular level Makes a lot of difference.
What aspects of rural school education were the most successful?
I smile at that one because I used to like to joke that when I went to college and I heard all these great slogans, most of them were in practice out in the rural school. In other words, interacting with parents, you don't do it any more than you do out in the rural school. Individualized instruction, you don't have any better individualized instruction than you have out in the rural school. And you can go right down the list of all the old educational slogans we used to have. In some way, it would be in practice. And we had to reinvent them in the town school to adapt to it.
What aspects of the rural education were the least successful?
I'm not sure that I can honestly say that. My personal opinion is that your average student would probably come out all right, but I'm not sure that some of the better ones were getting the breadth of. In fact, one of the worst educational scenes I ever saw was in a rural type. It happened to be a religious school, but it just, well, I've also been around the Amish schools, so I've had to deal with them too. And you can have education but don't not be taught very much. I quit.
In retrospect, do you feel that the closing of rural schools in Iowa was appropriate?
It had to happen, and it was good. We were able to expand, get other features into our classrooms. So that not just become special education. It started being popular when in my earlier days. And we weren't doing that much for handicapped kids. They were basically not attending school, or they might be in some class in a city that didn't teach much and didn't know what they were doing. And you wouldn't have gotten the progress that you got by going into vocational schools. Your high schools started expanding, and that brought up vocational education. That was a big help in this state.
What elements of these country schools do you think would be good for our schools today?
I'm not one that looks back too much.
Okay.
And I can't honestly say I could pick out something that I'd like to see, I think, moved ahead.
Okay. Did they use their rural school buildings for other uses besides just the school?
Well, the state and I got into it one time because they wanted us to use the rural school for special ed classes. Things like trainable children, like Down syndrome children and so forth. They didn't think they belonged in the public school at that time.
So this was after the country school had been closed?
Yeah.
And most of the children are going to town school?
Yeah.
And then the State Department wants you to
Take
open
the
one?
Down syndrome, let's open it up and put these kids
Okay.
out in there. Now, we had that, we refused to do it. We put it into a public school building up in Alta Vista. It was a two-story old brick building, and we got a class in there, but at least they were with the other kids, and it worked out good.
Were the buildings used at all then after consolidation?
The ones I knew of, no. Many times they referred it back to the farmer whose land they were taken away from in the first place. Many of them are still up there deteriorating. You drive up by El Dorado and up through there, you'll see the roof is off this one, and the next one looks like it's been all beat up. No, the farmer didn't have any use for it. Now, I do know that you've got different places where you have a town hall, township hall. 2 or 3 of them up our way right now, used for elections and township meetings, but no great usage. Someone has to upkeep it.
How did the rural and town folks get along?
No, you mean the kids or the,
Well, let's start with the kids.
I'd have to say in the rural Iowa, I never saw that much problem. Like I mentioned before, we had them going to the same churches. They didn't want to shop in the same towns. I mean, they didn't feel that far separated.
Can you say the same for their parents?
I'd have to say parents, I'll tell you another anecdote. Arch Morris was my boss. He was the county superintendent in Fayette County for many years. And he did a wonderful job on their school district reorganization. And he was out talking to all these people on reorganization. And he made a comment to me once that he never heard children being discussed as part of reorganization. You'd hear them discussed as, I like to play cards with this group in this town, or I like to shop over here, or this time. He said until one mother came up to him one time and said she was so happy they were reorganizing. He said, it's the only time I ever heard a kid mention. But that gave her daughter a chance not to use an outdoor bathhouse. Now, I don't think most parents were a bit sad by it.
Can you think of any local or national or world events that occurred when all of this was happening that had a major impact on education?
Ooh. I'd have to sit and look at timelines, but I'm thinking like your vocational schools, that push, and back in that science period where maybe I'd have to check and make sure it's satellite and the boys going to the moon and all this.
Sputnik.
I'd like to put them together
Oh,
on
okay.
timelines, but you had a sudden push for a lot of vocational education strong at one time. We used to have different spells, periods that came through computers. Got to be very popular and suddenly dominated education in Iowa for a while, between the State Department, the county offices, and everyone else. Now, whether there was something going on in the world that helped trigger that, I'm not sure, but I'm just trying to think of some.
Who would you say were the people at that time that had the largest impact on education in Iowa?
Different levels. At the state level, when I first started teaching, I still remember the state superintendent was a real nice lady, and she wore a hat that was about 10 feet wide, and she'd wear that out and give her a talk. But that was back in the days of the rural school. Then you got into, Bob got to be state superintendent. That's when you started getting your move for vocational schools, your move for AEAs. I think Bob was one of the best.
It's Bob. Are we talking about the governor?
No, state superintendent.
Oh, the state superintendent, okay.
And I wish you wouldn't ask me, because right now, Gene, I
Okay.
can't think of.
Well,
the
maybe,
last name.
maybe we can look that up. So that would have been about the time the schools were closing? You
Yeah.
would say in the
He
mid-sixties?
was in that period.
Okay, the state superintendent had a big,
His name was Robert, oh boy. But he provided a leadership down there and was able to get along with the politicians well enough to get a lot of it through. Then you get out in the local area. There's a lot of people that influenced education that you'll never hear about. I'll mention the name you know, Charles Antes. Charles Antes was state board president. We got down in the library one time, or post office. And I remember I asked him, what's he gonna do about vocational education? I didn't know what I was talking about. He looked at me and said, when you guys get busy at the local level, and before we got out of there, He had me call a meeting of all the superintendents and board members in Northeast Iowa. He talked to them, and he got a committee set up. That's what started with Kelmer. But he was a power behind the scenes. I mean, you didn't read about him in the paper. You didn't pat him on the back and everything. He just got things done. And I'm sure most towns had somebody around with that type of an influence.
Why do you think Iowa's education system has always been so highly regarded?
Mainly just because we had everyone going to school. I look back at my folks, immigrants from Denmark, and all they knew about was labor. I think my dad went to 4th grade. Had more brains than I'll ever have, but education was not the key to most of the people I knew that came over. And it was the next generation where we started going on to school more. And I just think we got to a point that most of our people have had an education. And you can't say that about a lot of other countries.
Anything else that you think would be important for us to know about rural education, county superintendents?
I won't presume to be a seer on that topic, but county superintendency, I think, was judged by the rural school days. And most people fail to recognize that there was a transition from the rural school days into reorganization, into special services, and so forth. And so you come up with the AEAs. Actually, the county superintendency was just kind of transition, headed that direction. It was a great job.
Very good. I sure appreciate you sharing your time, your expertise, and your knowledge. It's invaluable to us.
I told you I wouldn't be too much of an expert on rural schools.
Oh, but you've shared some very fun, some interesting things, some fun things. Your anecdotes were wonderful. Thank you.
I speak too much sometimes.
Oh, do you have one more for us before we end?
Oh, I better not.
Okay.
What about Chuck, though?
Oh, all right. Well, let's...
No,
Oh.
I don't think anyone ever really understood the influence that man had on
Oh.
the vocational school.
Oh. So would you say that, so was